Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for an essential update on the imminent new curriculum for trauma and orthopedics. Thanks for making the time to joining us now that you can get out and the pubs are open again. And we'll be recording this as well for later review. My plan is to keep this session tight and to keep it to 60 minutes max. We've got a few slides of some key information, and I suggest that we do a Q&A at the end as a roundtable. And you may find that your questions have already been answered, but if you do have any, please use the Q&A function at the bottom, and we'll go through those questions towards the after we've shared some slides. So just to set the scene, I have a couple of introductory questions for Rob Gregory in his role as chair of the Specialist Advisory Committee. Rob, the first question is, we've all been familiar with the concept of a curriculum since our GCSEs, but for those that don't know, what is the background to the BOA's curriculum?
Well, some of us that are really quite old, like me, will remember the days when there was no curriculum. But the first elements of the curriculum came along with the first FRCS author exam in the early 1990s. And some of you that don't know this will be quite amused by the fact that the exam initially was voluntary. It wasn't compulsory for 2 or 3 years. The first curriculum was published in 2006, having been approved by PMET-B, and the credit for that goes to the authors of that curriculum, including David Pitts, who led it, and a number of others, including Claire Marks, who everyone should be familiar with. And the real value of the curriculum is that it sets the standards by which we can measure the success of our ability to train our doctors and future consultant colleagues.
Thanks, Rob. One thing that people are wondering is, why is it that we need to change it now from the current curriculum, given that we've all kind of become used to it? What's the need for change?
Well, the curriculum was designed initially to be a dynamic document, and the plan was to revise it every 3 years in order to reflect changes in clinical practice. This particular change was quite a big change, not in the syllabus, but in the remainder of the curriculum, relates initially to the GMC document Excellence by Design, which introduced the concept of the generic professional capabilities that apply across the whole of medicine. And it's the method of assessment that is the major change in this curriculum. And we think it's a move in the right direction to produce better, even better quality day one consultants at the end of the period of training.
And the last question is, do you think we're ready for this new curriculum in August, given that it's only 4 weeks away?
Well, I hope so. There's a lot of work that's been done to try and make everyone familiar with it. And what we wanted was for people to be fed up with talk about the curriculum by the beginning of August, because they were so familiar with it. But we know that the vast majority of people involved in orthopedic training will have gaps in their knowledge, and many people will have large gaps. And I think it's events like this tonight that we're extremely grateful for, and hopefully we can use this to fill those gaps that exist.
Thank you. I really think that there's some really key information coming. What we're going to do now is, so everyone knows Lisa Hadfield-Law, surgical educationalist to the stars.
Trainees will be better and easier with the new curriculum. There, I've said it. I'm that sure. All that box ticking and WBA stacking is off, and you'll be able to refocus on preparing the person, the surgeon, and the colleague at the end of training. No more of these individual bricks and risking ending up with a wonky old house like this, which is frankly just not fit for purpose. We'll be able to focus not just on traditionally defined subject content, like do trainees know about the neurophysiology of the knee or degenerative conditions? Can they do a total hip or a carpal tunnel? To can they manage a theatre list or outpatients safely and effectively? And can they be trusted on call or to work with other team members without causing World War III? So on the professional issues, the glue that holds surgical practice together. Now, this won't launch for another couple of months, so there's still time to find the wrinkles and iron them out. So how do you decide that your trainee is trained. If we begin with the end in mind, so that is what a surgeon should be able to do at the end of a training period or the whole of training, we can then decide whether the trainee is either trained or ready to move to the next level. We need to spend more time gathering and analysing examples and using those to make judgments halfway through a placement and then at the end of a placement. We need to decide that with colleagues. Supervisors will be at the very heart of these decisions. And let's be honest, we've been asking for that for years. So we've got two frameworks to help us. Generic professional capabilities, written by the GMC and underpinned by all the intelligence they've got about why doctors get into trouble. And then capabilities in practice, or Cips, which have been written by ISCP. Make no mistake, both have been designed by users, people like you, not out-of-touch educationalists in ivory towers. Both provide the language we need to communicate about surgical performance. So Gpcs first. Now, if I'm honest, at first glance I poo-pooed some of these, but every single one has turned out to be much, much more relevant and useful than I first imagined. There are 220 descriptors, which are a bit like phrases in a phrasebook, and they help us put words around the capabilities and levels of performance expected. These have really helped me focus, not just for giving feedback, but I've used them to negotiate for funding for learning programs too. So in future, rather than just being left to chance, these crucial elements of surgical practice will be assessed and will carry as much weight as the knowledge and skills components of the rest of our curriculum. So here are the domains, three really fundamental ones. Number one, knowledge here. 2, skills. 3, values and behaviours. And then 6 targeted ones that are the fundamentals of being a good doctor. And they are designed to support something like 68 different curricula, different medical curricula. So for us, for example, we'll have using medical devices safely, and that probably would go in here. Safeguarding vulnerable people. Now, that's not just the protected groups. Particularly relevant to T&O surgeons are those with depression, dementia and delirium. Those with extremes of age, the mentally ill. This health promotion and illness prevention, initially I thought, oh, but of course it's hugely relevant. So some of these will be passions of yours, others not. And we've got to resist the temptation to teach and assess just our passions and instead try to focus on what individual learners need. Now, along with generic professional capabilities, there are capabilities in practice, or Cips. These were created by ISCP, and you can see here that they're our units of professional practice, the things surgeons need to be able to do broadly. They shift the focus from numbers to assessing how well trainees can manage an outpatient clinic or an unselected emergency take, how well they manage inpatients or a theatre list, and whether they can work with the multidisciplinary team. Cips will be assessed against what's expected of a day one consultant, whether they're a CT2 or an ST8, and the trainer's job is to help the trainee plan how to get from where they are to the next level towards being a day one consultant. So how would these GPCs and CIPs be assessed? Well, once the learning agreement has been made between the assigned educational supervisor and the trainee will appoint a lead clinical supervisor after discussion with the AES. And that lead clinical supervisor will be responsible for pulling together at least 2 consultants for an MCR. Ideally 4, but in smaller units, you may struggle to do that. So there need to be enough people to be able to assess each one of those 5 CIPs. Those involved in the MCR should review that last MCR and then arrange to meet halfway through the trainee's placement, if possible, to discuss each of the CIPs and any of the relevant generic professional capabilities. The group then should meet again at the end of the placement to assess each CIP again, and that will be used to create the AES report, which will recommend how the trainee should progress. Copies of the MCR will then be sent to all of those involved so that any of the more dominant supervisors can't override the opinion of the others. Remember that people doing the MCR don't need to actually see the learning agreement, because the MCR is about witnessed performance at work. Those who've already done MCRs say that it really only takes about 20 minutes to do a good trainee. Now, obviously, it's going to take longer for a struggling one, but I would anticipate nowhere near as long as the current toing and froing around problems with training. The key to great feedback is definitely good examples. Feedback without examples just isn't feedback. So you can try these out now, these MCRs, on your ISCP site with one of your trainees if you're a trainer, or you can do it yourself as a self-assessment if you're a trainee. And you'll find these kind of drop-down boxes with descriptors in, but as I've been practicing, I've found the language much easier and quicker to use, so I don't need to resort to those descriptors anymore. And then when you've completed all the relevant boxes, you get a final report. Before August, these practice ones won't appear on the ISCP system. They're not held there, but you can PDF them for yourself and use it as a discussion tool. Trainees, you might want to do that and print out a PDF for discussion at the start of your next placement. Honestly, this shouldn't add to your workload assessment in terms of time. You can see an overview of the process here. The main focus will be the MCR alongside self-assessments. Having made the learning agreement, the usual MSF and exams, and work-based assessments will continue, be much more focused on index procedures, critical conditions, and trainees who've got additional needs. Now, here's an idea from Bob Handley in Oxford originally, which isn't mandated in the curriculum, but which you might want to include in your requirements as trainers and as trainees, because these will satisfy a number of the Gpcs and the Cips. Towards the end of training, when trainees have identified which subspecialty they're favouring, they should select cases that straddle 2 specialties. So for us, this might well include plastics, neurosurgery, radiology, anaesthetics, ED, wherever you find turf battles. And then the trainee will be expected to select a case which straddles another specialty and negotiate for a CBD with a consultant from that other specialty. Multidisciplinary team working, humility, negotiation, resource management, those are all important GPCs that can be achieved through interspecialty CBDs. Sure, this will require negotiation skills with clinicians from another specialty, but that's part of the assessment. And in T&O, there'll be more of a focus on supporting career plans rather than just dealing with the obvious training opportunities in front of you. If you don't know what your trainees' long-term plans and passions are, you can't use your networks and opportunities to help. If trainees can be crystal clear with their potential mentors about their passions and plans, trainers can help them establish really good networks from early on. You can see here an example. PDPs are long-term career visions rather than the learning agreements which just cover what the trainee needs to do over their 6-month placement in line with the curriculum. Finally, this supervisor report, or what might be called in the autumn field notes, has had the greatest impact on my performance as a trainer over the last few years. Every time I'm anywhere near a trainee and they do anything especially impressive or worrying, I'll make a note describing, not judging, what happened. So, for example, Joe asked for feedback from me and then was offered 3 opportunities for a feedback conversation but declined each one. Or Sam joined a core surgical training programme on teamwork at the last minute to lead on an action learning set and received excellent evaluations. See relevant CBD. So I discussed the note with the trainee without judging, so not you're unreliable or you swerve feedback or you're a great trainee, but very specific examples. Then record a few notes on my phone and cut and paste into ISCP once a week. Critical feedback is rarely popular, but most trainees expect honest feedback from me now, so it's never a shock, as we'll have discussed it beforehand. So, in summary, I think the new curriculum is better and easier. The multi-consultant report is pivotal. This is an opportunity to create bespoke feedback to help our trainees, and it captures excellence too. The work-based assessments will not be about numbers, and there'll be a reduced focus, but they will be more relevant. And this is a real opportunity to share responsibility between trainers and trainees. If you want to know more, you can join one of the regional vetoes programmes run by the BOA free of charge. Just ask your TPD. But you can see our curricula will shift from being a list of topics to learn or procedures to do to a focus on an all-round, safe and effective surgeon.